Okay guys, so it is finally here at last, and that of course is the Fishband CLAMBER Hyper Micro Bait Finesse Reel. Now before we open this box up, I gotta go into a little bit of a backstory, because Fishband reached out to me several months ago, back in I think November of last year, and they wanted to send me one of these reels to test and give some feedback on, but my dumbass gave them the wrong zip code for my address, and UPS for some reason in their incompetence couldn't figure out that all they needed to do was change the zip code and send it to the right address, even when Fishband and myself had contacted them to do so. So they wound up sending that reel back to Fishband, and Fishband said that they would resend it back out after they found a US distributor here. But I saw this on AliExpress and thought the honorable thing to do would be to just purchase it myself, since I screwed up the first attempt. And here we go. Alright, so as you can see, we have a nice pinkish red box, and this reel's actually been out for quite a few months now, but they've really only been on AliExpress for a few weeks if you can find them. Alright, so you got a nice little bag here and paperwork, so we're going to stick that off to the side, and let's check out this stunning reel right here. Boom! Check this reel out, guys. Now, I've seen a couple of videos, not a lot of people have this reel, but yeah, this reel is absolutely stunning to look at. A lot of details there. I'm going to let you guys take a good look at this reel. Now of course I'm going to study this reel, take a bunch of notes, and get back to you, because this is a very important bait finesse reel. Okay guys, so I'll have to admit that after the GH100 came out a couple of years ago, there's really not been any new bait finesse reels coming out in China on AliExpress that have really gotten me excited up until this reel right here. And with this Fishband CLAMBER Hyper Micro, I think it's safe to say that Fishband is probably the leading bait finesse reel maker in China by far. Now of course they stormed onto the scene and got everyone's attention with this reel right here, the GH100, which was almost a direct copy of Shimano's ALDEBARAN BFS, and this reel was groundbreaking in the fact that it copied the best finesse braking system in the world in Shimano's FTB, but it gave it to you in a package that pretty much anyone in the world could afford. And then they broke some more ground by offering the PW100, which I believe was the first reel on AliExpress that came in under the 5-ounce mark. So a super featherweight reel that is just as light as Shimano's ALDEBARAN, but at a fraction of the cost. And this reel is also a pretty damn good bait finesse reel as well. So what about this reel makes it so special that it's gotten me so excited versus, you know, those other two reels I just showed you, or any other bait finesse reel off AliExpress? Well, in my opinion, this is the reason why. Because of the specs of this CLAMBER Hyper Micro, I believe Fishband is aiming for Japan's top BFS guns. So I mean, this reel is probably designed to compete with the very top JDM bait finesse reels like the STEEZ Air, the Alpha's Air, Shimano's ALDEBARAN BFS and CONQUEST BFS, Abu Garcia's REVO LTX BF8 and ALC BF7, and we'll go more into that here in just a moment. But I want to show you guys all the styling cues on this reel, and there's quite a lot. Now once again, this is a stunning reel, and you can see that it's got a nice dark gray paint job that's got a nice glossy finish. So the finish is not black, it's a dark gray, and the frame looks to be based off the same frame as the current PW100, Spirit Fox, etc, etc. But it's got just the right amount of red. So you can see the spool is red, but if you take a closer look, it's got a more satiny matte finish versus a shiny finish that you'll find on other bait finesse reels. You'll see there's a bunch of red accents on the components, like the knob end caps, the nut retainer, and check out this little trim piece here on the gearbox. That is very high-end and classy looking, and this is made of machined aluminum, and it's got a bunch of writing on it. And the most interesting bit of writing is it says Korea engineered. And then of course you got this extremely detailed spool tension knob, and these little trim pieces are like a root beer color with the red accents, and it's even got a red bar where the level wind travels. That's usually a aftermarket upgrade for a lot of other reels. If you wanted to color that, you'd have to find a company that makes it and order it, but you get that standard on the CLAMBER Hyper Micro. Now this brake dial trim here is aluminum, and yeah, it's just an overall very good looking reel in my opinion. It's got a nice shape. Of course, since it's using the same frame as the PW100, it is super low profile and very comfortable to palm. And with that being said, let's go over the basic specs on this reel. Now before we get into the specifications and features, I just want to make a quick correction, and that is that I was in error in saying that this reel is actually based off the same frame as the PW100. So this is going to give us a perfect chance to compare the size of this reel to a lot of other bait finesse reels. And of course we're going to start off with the PW100, and they are very similar, and they use a lot of the same components like thumb bar and I think the brake dial, but yeah, you can see that the clamber is actually thinner and it looks to be a little bit longer than the PW100, and I believe the frame might actually be slightly narrower, and the scalloping is different on the clamber than on the PW100 on that side plate there, and it actually looks, if I'm not mistaken, to be a hair lower in profile than the PW100. But yeah, this is a totally different frame and side plates than the PW100. So my correction there, and you can see the handle side plate is different as well. But yeah, this is what it looks like against the PW100. So next up, we're going to compare it in size to the KASTKING Zephyr, which is a red hot selling bait finesse reel. And as you can see, they are very similar in size, but in hand I'll give the edge to the CLAMBER Hyper Micro. It looks to be a little bit thinner and maybe a tad shorter, but yeah, it's definitely sitting lower on the reel seat than the KASTKING Zephyr. And next up is going to be the GH100, also from Fishband. And you can see it is noticeably bigger than the CLAMBER Hyper Micro. and definitely much taller than the CLAMBER Hyper Micro as well. Alright, so next up is the Spirit Fox, which I believe is the reel that shares the same frame with the PW100. And the Spirit Fox is noticeably wider than the CLAMBER Hyper Micro. Okay, so let's start comparing this reel to some JDM BFS reels. And here is the REVO UltraCast BF8 from Abu Garcia. And the UltraCast is very short and square, while the CLAMBER is definitely more of a rectangle shape. But they are very similar in height. But yeah, that's how it looks compared to the REVO UltraCast BF8, which shares the same frame as the LTX BF8. Next up is going to be Shimano's Scorpion BFS. And looks to me that the Scorpion is smaller. It's going to be a little bit thinner and definitely shorter. But this is one of the smallest reels out on the market today. Right, next up is going to be the ALDEBARAN BFS. And they are very similar in size when I look at them outside of my camera's LCD screen. Maybe the ALDEBARAN is a tad shorter and maybe just a hair thinner, but if I switch positions on this camera, will that change the perspective any? Maybe just a little bit, but they are very, very similar in size, and the CLAMBER actually looks like it is lower in profile. Now the last reel we're going to compare it to is going to be DAIWA's Alphas Air TW. And the Alphas is clearly smaller, it's thinner, and it is shorter. And it might actually be a little bit lower or about the same as far as height goes. So I wonder what the size of this spool is, but as you can see here, it definitely dwarfs the spool on the Alphas Air. So yeah, those are the size comparisons to a lot of the current BFS reels from Japan and China that are still available for sale. This reel is very comfortable to palm, and yeah, let's get on to the specifications and features. Okay, so now we're going to go over the specs and features of this reel, and to help me out with the basic specs, I have brought the box back out and let's take a look. So you're looking at a gear ratio of 6.6 to 1, and I think that is the only gear ratio available right now. Max drag is 4.5 kilos, and that equates to just under 10 pounds of drag, which is good, because as I've stated before, you don't need huge drag pressure numbers when you're running light line. It's got a total of 9 + 1 bearings, and there's your line capacity, and as you can see, they have it listed in, I guess, line thickness. And I think that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, it does come in left and right hand. So now that we got the basic specs out of the way, let's go into the features of the Hyper Micro, and there are quite a lot. Now there are two main things that set this reel apart from most AliExpress bait finesse reels, and the first one is that this has an aluminum frame, as you can see, and it's also got a split reel foot. But yeah, this features an aluminum frame for rigidity and longevity. I believe the side plates are carbon. Now there are a handful of other bait finesse reels on AliExpress that have aluminum frames, but for the most part the majority of them are carbon graphite. So next up is the very skeletonized finesse oriented carbon fiber handle that comes in at a pretty short 80 millimeters. Now, personally, I wish they would have made it 85 millimeters, but as you can see, it's very skeletonized, I guess, to save weight. It is swept, and you can definitely see the individual carbon fiber layers in this handle. And let's talk about the knobs next. Now, these are very small finesse oriented knobs. Now, normally I like flat knobs, I don't like round knobs for bait finesse, but if you make the knobs small enough, they are definitely okay. And these definitely fit the bill for what I consider finesse knobs. So next up is the fact that pretty much everything on this reel clicks. So of course you got your clicking drag star, which is made of either graphite or carbon, but it's a nice loud click. The spool tension clicks as well, and these are the very short micro throw clicks that feel very, very positive, and they are pretty loud. In fact, this is the best feeling spool tension knob that clicks other than my DAIWA SS Air. Feels even better than my much more expensive Conquest BFS spool tension clicker. Now, of course, the brake dial clicks. And one thing about this brake dial, now here's the PW100. As you can see, they share pretty much the same frame, but this is plastic on the PW100. And the clicks on the brake dial are very muted and vague. They feel pretty cheap. But on the Hyper Micro, it's a lot more positive and loud. So you definitely know when you are turning this knob that you are adjusting these brakes. And once again, this external dial is made of aluminum, at least this ring is. And of course the numbers are painted white, so you can definitely see them. And that's definitely a plus. And another thing is that this reel has way more brake adjustments than the PW100. So let's count all the clicks on the PW100. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So the PW100 has a total of 23 clicks for a total of 24 total brake settings. Now let's count the clicks on the CLAMBER Hyper Micro. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. So the Hyper Micro has a total of 39 clicks, meaning this reel has 40 total brake settings. So almost double that of the PW100. So you really should be able to dial in maximum casting potential out of this reel since it has so many brake settings. And yes, this also clicks. So the CLAMBER Hyper Micro does have a clicking drag. So for a lot of you guys, that's definitely a plus, because there are some of you out there who actually go to the trouble of installing clicking drags on your reels, and this one does have it stock. Okay, so as you can see, I have the scale out, but the interesting thing about this CLAMBER is that Fishband didn't really list anything on the box about how much it weighs. So it makes me think that they really didn't want to draw too much attention to that. But I can tell you in hand, it feels pretty light. So what does the scale say? 5.3 ounces. So that is actually very, very light. Yep, 5.29 ounces, so pretty much 5.3 ounces for the CLAMBER Hyper Micro. So that means comparing this reel to AliExpress bait finesse reels, there's really only one reel that weighs less than this that I know of, and that is its stablemate, the PW100, which comes in at 4.88. So there's less than half an ounce between these two in weight, and the PW100 does feel lighter, but I'll definitely take that trade-off since this clamber has that rigid aluminum frame. Now when it comes to the JDM reels, this clamber is actually going to be lighter than all but your super ultralight reels like your DAIWA, STEEZ Air, your ALDEBARAN BFS, your Abu Garcia REVO LTX BF8. So that means this reel is lighter than your Scorpion BFS. It's going to be lighter than even the Alpha's Air TW, and it's going to be significantly lighter than your incoming CURADO and SLX BFS from Shimano. So yeah, while Fishband didn't really make a big deal about the weight, it is a very, very lightweight reel and super, super comfortable to palm once again. But now it's time to get to what we've all been waiting for, and that is to get a weight on this spool. So to access the spool on the CLAMBER Hyper Micro, it's just like the PW100 and Spirit Fox. You just push up on this latch, turn the side plate up, and it comes off. And now we get to check out the brake system. And as you can see, unfortunately, Fishband opted to use the static MagTrack style system with 6 magnets instead of opting to use the fake dynamic FTB system that it put in the GH100. So that's pretty disappointing, but the only thing I can say is I hope that these magnets are strong enough, because everything else on this reel so far has been pretty impressive. Alright, I'm going to put that over there, and let's pull this very unique spool out. Alright, as you can see, they opted to use the long spool shaft that's made of aluminum. There's a bearing, and they have the, I guess, the metal plate here that interacts with the magnets, and they've colored it black, so that's pretty cool. I like that. But once again, the coloring is this satiny matte finish instead of a shiny anodization like a lot of other reels. And you can also see that the channel where the line lays has been narrowed, so it will hold less line. And I guess that negates the fact that the spool, while it is very shallow, is not as shallow as some of its competition out there, but it is still pretty shallow. And maybe they did this in order to, I guess, minimize the chances of line getting in between the spool and the frame, which is often a problem in bait finesse when you are using super, super light line like I do. But yeah, this thing is super ported out. Look at all the holes that it has, and then you turn it this way, look at all those other holes that they've drilled out of this thing. So this thing feels wafer light. But let's see what the scale says. Okay, so with the bearing, looks like 8 grams on the dot. Let's weigh that again. 8 grams on the dot. So you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull out my spool bearing remover, and I actually got a new one, and we're going to remove that bearing and get a true weight on this spool. Okay, so spool bearing and pin removed, and let's weigh the spool now. 6.4 grams. All right, let's do that a couple more times. 6.4 grams, and one more for good measure. It says 6.5 grams, but it's hovering between 6.4 and 6.5. So this is a super, super lightweight spool, especially when you consider this is a Chinese BFS reel. So to put this into context, I'm going to put up a list of all the spool weights in order of all the AliExpress Chinese BFS reels, and this is the lightest by far. And I think the only one that comes close is going to be the PW100 Pro, and these two spools are the only ones that weigh under 7 grams. But looks like the CLAMBER Hyper Micro has definitely got the PW100 spool beat. So how does this stack up to the Japanese reels? And I'm gonna go ahead and put up a graphic on the screen for you. And this spool is lighter than all but maybe a couple of JDM BFS reels, and those reels are your REVO LTX BF8, and it looks like your DAIWA Alphas Air TW. And these are numbers of the spools that I've weighed personally. So this CLAMBER Hyper Micro spool weighs less than all of Shimano's bait finesse reels by a significant margin, including the up-and-coming CURADO and SLX BFS. So as you can see, very impressive. And as I said before, it looks like Fishband is aiming for Japan's best when they designed this reel, because it has a spool that is right up there with the lightest ones coming out of Japan. But let's try to figure out the size of this spool. Now my gut tells me it's 34 millimeters, but let me see what this spool will fit into. So I went online trying to see if I could find the diameter of this spool, but eventually I just pulled the spool out and tried to fit it into several other reels, and I believe the spool is 34 millimeters in diameter. It's definitely not 32, and it's a hair bigger than the spools that I have that are 33 millimeters in diameter, so it is more than likely 34 millimeters. So while this spool is very light, it is pretty big for bait finesse. Now this brings me to a point I wanted to bring up. Now if you go to the YouTube channel called Fishing Discoveries, which is ran by my new friend Paul, he actually is one of the few people that has this reel, and he weighed his spool, and his spool was significantly lighter than mine, coming in at about 6.17 grams. So his spool is actually lighter than the Alphas Air TW. So I'm not sure what the difference is between mine and his spool is, but yeah, I'm pretty disappointed that my spool was not as light as his. And while that may not sound like a huge amount, it's definitely going to affect the ease of casting when it comes down to lures under 2 grams. So yeah, go check out the Fishing Discoveries website. He's got a lot of BFS content, and also check out his YouTube channel, which also has a lot of BFS content as well. So if any of you guys watched my beginner's guide to bait finesse, my requirements for a bait finesse reel really only had 3 things. And the first thing is that the spool needs to be 9 grams and under if the reel had magnetic brakes. So the CLAMBER Hyper Micro definitely has that. The second requirement was that the reel has to have strong brakes. So of course this is just an initial tabletop review, but it looks like the reel definitely has some strong brakes. So right now we got the brakes turned to 0, and the spool tension, I'm going to set it to just minimize the side-to-side play. There we go. And you can see the free spool is pretty impressive, and this is with stock bearings. So if we turn it all the way up to the maximum position and we try the free spool test, you see that, whoa, I don't think it even spins barely a second. So far on the brake front, it looks like it is going to meet the requirements, but we're going to have to test that out on the water, of course. Now the final thing was that the reel has to have a smooth, easy startup for the drag in order to protect your light line. And that's where I think this reel may have an issue. So when Fishband contacted me a few months ago offering to send this reel for review, they also wanted me to give any kind of suggestions on what could be improved. Now of course these suggestions I'm going to give are based on this initial tabletop review and not anything having to do with casting performance. And I also want to state that the improvements I'm going to suggest hopefully are improvements that can be easily made without increasing the cost of the reel or anything that would dip into the profit margin of making this reel. because in the end I know that fishing tackle is still a business. Now the first thing I would improve is the drag clicker, and let me show you what I mean. Now it's great that this reel does have a drag clicker, as that apparently is becoming a very popular thing amongst bait finesse anglers, but let me show you this. You see when I'm turning this handle and the drag is clicking, it's literally shaking the reel. So in contrast, here is a REVO LTX BF8 that also has a drag clicker, but you see the reel does not shake, and the clicks are spaced closer together than that of the CLAMBER Hyper Micro. So yeah, this is literally shaking the reel when I'm turning this handle, clicking this drag. So I took a look at the schematics on this reel, and unfortunately they were so small it was hard for me to see, but I would definitely put the clicks closer together and make them not so violent as to shake the reel if the drag is being pulled, because in my mind that could affect the ease of startup once a fish starts pulling a line. So hopefully an improvement like that will not cost them anything, just change a small plastic part within the reel. Now another improvement I would like to suggest that shouldn't cost too much money or any money at all is that check out the line guide. It is poked out very, very far, which is good, but if you could fit a conical line guide like the Shimano ALDEBARAN has, and like the KASTKING Zephyr and a few other reels, and that should improve castability and give a little bit of distance. But the good news is that they have synchronized the level line to compensate for the narrower spool channel. Hopefully you guys can see that. But yeah, that may be a very cheap or no cost improvement that Fishband could have their factory make. Now the last thing I would improve is going to be quality control and consistency. So we already saw that the spool on my reel is noticeably heavier than the spool on the reel of Fishing Discovery's CLAMBER, and that was a big disappointment for me because you know I want the lightest spool possible. So I'm not sure what caused that discrepancy in spool weight. And another thing is that the drag star feel needs to be improved. So it's a loud click, but the clicks, they feel cheap. I don't know how else to explain it. They don't feel very precise. There's a lot of wiggle in between clicks, as you guys can see there. So that makes the reel feel like a cheap reel, and that's kind of disappointing because this is not a cheap feeling reel other than that. And also the paint job, while it is awesome, it looks good, I did find a couple of inconsistencies there, like right there, and I think there's a few other places I saw those little dots. But the final thing is the thumb bar. Now I'm not sure if all the thumb bars look like that, but you can see there's an imperfection in my thumb bar. Now the thumb bar feels great. There's no wiggle, no mushiness, and they did give it this nice dark chrome type finish, but you can see that imperfection there, which is pretty disappointing. But so far, other than that, the reel is pretty awesome. Okay, so to end this video off, I'm gonna finally go over something that I purposely left until the end of the video to discuss, and that is the price of this reel. Now I'm not gonna beat around the bush. I paid $150 for this reel, plus tax on AliExpress. So I'm trying to figure out why AliExpress is charging sales tax to overseas orders, but oh well, it is what it is. So yeah, for all you guys who are normally used to paying, you know, about $60 to $70 for BFS reels from AliExpress, this is definitely not one of them. And I will have to admit that I was pretty shell-shocked at that price myself. Now, when the CLAMBER Hyper Micro first surfaced a few months ago, I took a look at it and I knew that it was going to be packing an aluminum frame, and it definitely looked much nicer than any other BFS reel from China that I've seen so far, but I was expecting the price to be no more than $100. So yeah, needless to say, when I was told $150, and this was by a potential US distributor of this reel, I was pretty surprised. But now that I have the reel in hand and I've inspected it and checked out all the weights and specifications, in my opinion, this reel definitely has the on-paper specs to back up that $150 price tag. Now, this does cost double the price of reels such as the KASTKING Zephyr, Fishband GH100, the Spirit Fox, etc., etc. But you are getting an aluminum frame, a significantly lighter spool, as well as better quality components, and of course the highly fine-tunable braking system. And of course, this reel features the clicking drag. While not perfect, it still features a clicking drag nonetheless. Now, when it comes to the entire bait finesse scene, so that means including the Japanese reels, this reel at $150 is an absolute steal. Because as we saw, there are only a handful of reels that are going to be lighter than this reel, and there's only going to be maybe 1 or 2 reels that have lighter spools than this reel. So performance-wise, on paper, this reel should be able to kill off pretty much all bait finesse reels except for maybe 2 or 3 when it comes to casting performance and casting ultralight lures. So to put that into context, I fully expect this CLAMBER Hyper Micro to be able to outcast all the much more expensive JDM reels, including the Scorpion BFS, the up-and-coming CURADO and SLX BFS, and I think this reel should be able to keep up with the much more expensive reels that cost over twice as much, like the REVO LTX BF8, and perhaps even the DAIWA Alphas Air TW, and SHIMANO ALDEBARAN BFS and CONQUEST BFS when it comes to casting ultralight lures. Now, I will admit it does not have the smoothness and refinement of those much more expensive reels, but then again, it doesn't come with their price tag either. But of course, on paper specs are one thing and out on the water performance is another. So I'm of course going to string this reel up and we are going to go out and cast this thing and check out its usable casting range and just see how low it can go. But what I want you guys to do is I want you to comment in the comment section and let me know what you think of this reel costing the price that it does. Do you think it's worth $150 to get specs like these, or were you expecting it to be much cheaper? But either way, that's my initial tabletop review of the highly anticipated Fishband CLAMBER Hyper Micro, and of course the next time you see me with this reel is going to be out on the water. Alright guys, thanks a lot.